Hello, and welcome to this first assignment where we're going to take a look at academic freedom, freedom of speech, and academic discourse on a university campus. So, to start out with, especially using this idea of freedom of speech in general and as how it applies on a university campus, basically some different examples of this kind of throughout history, both of the United States as well as more recent history kind of around the world. We see that societal change occurs through challenging the status quo. And so, we probably, I think we'd all admit at this point, we probably don't live in an absolutely ideal and perfect world right now. There are problems in the world that need to be addressed. There are, individuals that are disenfranchised, that are discriminated against, that are basically treated in a way where they're not getting the opportunities that are available to everybody within society. And so if we take a look at this again from a historical perspective, kind of starting out over here on the left-hand portion of the slide, I get the names right, Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton, active in the women's suffragist movement, advocating for the right to vote for women, which actually came about after the turn of the century. In the middle, very, very famous Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., very strong proponent of peaceful disobedience to bring change, not through active conflict, but to have a peaceful kind of challenge to that status quo. And here he is, in his famous in 1963, "I Have a Dream" speech in front of the Lincoln Memorial. More recently, taking a look at Jim Obergefell, who was the plaintiff in the Supreme Court decision legalizing same-sex marriages. And so we can see that there were individuals that have been disenfranchised from society that don't have the benefits that are available to everybody else within society. And change only came about after that status quo was challenged. Taking a look at this, globally within the world, different examples of that. Desmond Tutu, and I'll probably mispronounce this, Malaya Yousafzai, the Pakistani teen that was advocating for the ability for girls to get an education, to have the opportunities available to them that were available to the males, and this was in Pakistan. Again, she received the Nobel Prize as well. And then more recently, Greta Thunberg, active here in 2021, talking about taking up climate change and our need to counteract the effects of global warming, or we're going to see more severe climate. Going back to Desmond Tutu for a moment, this is a quote that I've used often within this class. I'll probably have to retire it now since I'm using it in this prompt, but it says, "If you are neutral in situations of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor." And so, the oppressor, the people that are benefiting from the status quo, aren't going to change on their own. They're going to need to be challenged in some way, and that's where freedom of speech comes in. And so if we take a look at it, and again, there have been lots and lots of discussions about the First Amendment and freedom of speech, to the point of describing freedom of speech as being the First Amendment because it is so incredibly important for the ability of the people to challenge the status quo, to challenge injustices that they see in an effort to change things for the better. And so if we take a look at this, and lots of misunderstandings about what the First Amendment actually says. And again, I hate reading these things, but I think it's important. Congress shall make no law, and respecting the establishment of religion, so that's the separation of church and state, but Congress shall make no law prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the freedom of speech. And goes on to talk about freedom of press as well. So it's important to recognize that what we're looking at is a situation where in the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, within the first 10, the Bill of Rights, we're looking at the fact that the Founding Fathers were recognizing the importance of the ability to speak out for, bringing their viewpoint forward, to challenge the status quo, especially to challenge those in power if they're not using that power responsibly and for the good of the people. Now, in 2022, taking a look at this, we're seeing there are challenges to the First Amendment. I'm recording this in mid-May 2022. Within the last 6 weeks, we're seeing examples where Florida is now passing laws to restrict Disney's ability to govern the region that they're in right now. A lot, even with that, lots of misunderstandings about what's going on. Basically, Disney is paying much more in the equivalent of property taxes to maintain the roads, put in the infrastructure, provide services like police and fire. And they got that as an ability to govern themselves, to be able to develop the Orlando area for Disney. It's been now challenged because of their coming out against a bill that was signed into law by the governor. In Tennessee, we're seeing that there are efforts to put into place a committee, a state commission, that will determine what school library books are going to be available. So, restricting, what is accessible to students in the public school system. And then finally over here, and this was, roughly less than a week ago now at this point, taking a look at the date, May 12th, we're seeing that Texas put a law in place basically prohibiting social media companies from banning users for kind of inflammatory speech or misinformation being put out there. Appeals court has reinstated the law, which basically says that companies like Twitter and Facebook, I think Twitter is the main one right now, but other social media apps basically have to be forced as a private company to do whatever their users want. They don't have the responsibility or the ability to limit disinformation and hateful speech on their platform. So challenges potentially to this idea of freedom of speech. Freedom of speech also doesn't apply to everything. And so examples of limits to the freedom of speech that have been established through Supreme Court decisions, and these are described as low First Amendment value. And so everybody has the freedom of speech, but there are potential consequences associated with what they are saying. And there are certain types of speech that are harmful to others and therefore are restricted in some ways. So examples of this: a defamation, making a false statement that damages a person's reputation. We're in the midst of primary season now for the 2022 elections. Pennsylvania's going to the primaries the day after I'm recording this. Lots of interesting advertisements that are going out. May or may not be as accurate as what we'd like to see in terms of political commentary, political kind of statements. But are they rising to the level of damaging the person's reputation? True threats, so threat to commit a crime, plan a crime, those things are limited in the area of free speech as well. Fighting words, to get into a face-to-face confrontation, making insults that have a high likelihood to result in an immediate fight. Triggering some type of action that is going to cause kind of an immediate retribution or response. Those are limited. Obscenity, something that is Supreme Court has said it's hard to define, but they'll recognize when they see it. But it's defined as hardcore, highly sexualized, explicit pornography. So potentially people will know when they see it. But then there have been artworks and installations that have challenged that definition of obscenity. Some of which that have been restricted, others of which have been allowed to move forward, again, by making these free speech arguments. Child pornography, again, that probably goes without any need for further explanation for why that's important. But again, a vulnerable population that is at risk of being exploited, and so freedom of speech does not allow for the exploitation of children in this way. And then finally, commercial advertising. It's similar to, kind of making misleading statements about other people and doing them harm. Making misleading statements in, what are the benefits of some type of product that they're producing, is potentially, taking advantage of people that would be swayed and listening to those comments and spending their hard-earned money to try to purchase something that isn't going to do what the claims are. Now, when we talk about free speech, we often think about that as kind of out in the real world, in the evening news, the things that are popping up in social media. But it's important to recognize that students also have rights to free speech as well. But they're, potentially limited within the school district, but the Supreme Court has come out and said that students don't shed their constitutional rights to freedom of speech or expression at the schoolhouse gates. And so a student has the right to speak out as long as it doesn't disrupt the function of the school. And so, students will get in trouble if they organize a walkout or a sit down. But they have the ability, without disrupting school function, the ability of other students to get an education, to speak out. They have the right to speak out as long as their message doesn't violate policies that hinge on the message expressed. And so, if you go to a school, and I don't have a baseball cap here within your easy reach, they allow baseball caps. They can't exclude somebody or prevent somebody from wearing a baseball cap with one message on it if they're going to allow another student to wear a baseball cap with a different message. And so they're looking at the fact that these policies have to be neutral to the message. And so it doesn't matter what it says. If they're allowed to have a shirt that says something or a t-shirt that says something, they could have something that would express their free speech in doing that. Now, again, outside of school, students should have the same rights as anyone else. And in general, it's come down that students should not be able to punish students for expression that they made off campus and outside of school hours in some way. And again, kind of a parallel to the Desmond Tutu speech. This is one by Frederick Douglass that, again, I haven't used it as much, but it fits in well here. To suppress free speech is a double wrong. It violates the rights of the hearer as well as those of the speaker. And so again, it's important, if we're going to use free speech, to challenge the status quo, that others are able to hear that expression of free speech, that get exposed to your ideas, and potentially, have their feelings swayed, have their viewpoints swayed by an argument that's made and is being expressed through free speech. Now, if we take this onto an academic campus, university setting, what does this mean? As we transition from freedom of speech, the free speech, to the concept of academic freedom. And so by definition, academic freedom is a movement to advance the common good, so the benefit of all, that is dependent upon the free search of truth and its free expression. Now, academic freedom was put into place to prevent professors and researchers from being restricted in what they're able to kind of research and comment on, just because it's potentially controversial. If we are going to be advancing the common good, potentially we have to learn about things that are potentially troubling and potentially controversial. See a lot of that within this class. We're going to take a look at the controversies associated with access to science and availability of the technology. And so that academic freedom then means that, and again, this is the definition from the AAUP 1940 Statement on Principles of Academic Freedom and Tenure. It says that teachers are entitled to freedom in the classroom in discussing their subject. But, and this is an important caveat, they have to be careful not to introduce into their teaching controversial matter which has no relation to their subject. And so you can't, proselytize your students in a way that, kind of sway them to your viewpoint if it has nothing to do with the topic that is you're covering. But you should be, as students and as professors, we should be, you know, exploring different alternatives. We should be exploring different perspectives so we can understand differing viewpoints. And again, that is a big goal I have for this class. When we take a look at Arcadia University as a university setting, take a look at its policies related to academic freedom, and again, they take this one step further. We take this one step further. Academic freedom comes with responsibility. So we sound like a quote from a Spider-Man movie. But again, according to the Arcadia University Faculty Handbook, we have academic freedom encompasses the rights of freedom, inquiry, expression, publication, association, debate, and dissent. But then it goes on. It says academic freedom also carries with it correlative responsibilities. Membership in the academic community, and that applies to everybody, faculty, students, staff, administrators, trustees. That obligation is to respect the dignity of others, to acknowledge their right to express differing opinions, and to foster and defend intellectual honesty, freedom of inquiry and instruction, and free expression on and off the campus. And goes on and specifically says, academic freedom does not require neutrality, but it does require accuracy, appropriate restraint, and respect for the opinions of others. And again, a key tenet in this class is that we're going to be exposed to others with differing opinions. And that's a good thing. We need to be exposed to diverse perspectives, but we need to be able to listen as well as speak our viewpoints, hopefully with evidence and support. But we must be respectful in that, and we must be respectful and allow others to express their viewpoints as well. Academic freedom is not a one-way street. We need to be able to have freedom of expression ourselves and extend that to others, as long as it doesn't fall into that category of low quality or low value of speech. Now, again, I like quotes that come through that put it into a little bit more perspective. This is a quote that's been attributed to many different people throughout history. I've tried to track it down, and I can't do it. And when I'm researching it, others haven't been able to do that as well. But it says, "Your right to swing your arms ends just where the other person's nose begins." So we do have free speech. We do have, as it says here, a free will, but that comes with a moral responsibilities. Individuals should be free to make their own personal choices so long as they don't harm others and are willing to accept the full responsibility for their actions. Again, as we indicated in that previous slide, that academic freedom also carries with it correlative responsibilities. And so if we take a look at that, again, from a university setting, when you get to your graduation and you are preparing to walk across the stage to receive your diploma, most university degrees are awarded with some type of language that says something like, with all the rights, privileges, and responsibilities thereon to appertaining or pertaining. I have to take a look at, I think I shortened this a little bit here. But basically, yes, we do have the ability to express ourselves, but we need to do this in a respectful manner and take responsibility for our actions. And so what does this mean in terms of academic discourse? And again, if we take a look at this from, and this is the Google dictionary, just because it was the first thing that popped up, discourse is described as a written or spoken communication or debate. Discourse is going to be the goal of this course. Discourse is going to be the ability to either, and we're going to write it as opposed to speaking it, in our discussions, these asynchronous discussion threads that we're going to have. It can be expressed in a written essay with some of the other assignments. And so the focus of this course is going to be on academic discourse. But again, I wanted to take a look at this from the verb perspective as well. Because it's not just writing and speaking in a debate or communicating your ideas. I like it when it's talked about as a verb, and it says to speak or write authoritatively about a subject. And so for me, this is what academic discourse means. The ability to share ideas, not just as random ideas that kind of popped in my head and I'm going to spurt them out, but to speak with authority about a subject. And this isn't to mean that you got to complete all your undergraduate degree and get a doctorate and do years of research so that you can be an authority on the subject. Question what it is that you're speaking about. Read a little bit about it. Get a little bit different perspective, and speak with authority. Speak with knowledge. Make your comments informed as you're going forward. And again, if we take a look at this, and again, the title doesn't have anything to do with the book. I like the book, The Value of the Academic Discourse, because conversations that matter. Conversations do matter. We need to be able to communicate and share ideas going back and forth one another. This is from an education website. It's actually a K-12 website talking about 4 key aspects of academic discourse, and they don't change just because you graduated from high school and gone into a university setting. And I'd argue that they are things that we should extend to freedom of speech and freedom of expression kind of all along. That we need to have critical thinking. We need to have the ability to challenge the viewpoints. You, as students, should be challenging what I'm saying. Yes, I'm the professor of the course, but I'm not perfect. I'm not, kind of an absolute authority on everything. I misspeak. I probably misspoke a couple times on this video series, at least in this video. Hopefully I catch it and correct it. But we need to be able to make informed comments. We need to be able to critically think and listen to other viewpoints as well. Reflective encouragement. We should be given the opportunity to think about what we are going to be presenting forward. And I know I struggle with this a little bit, just because I often say things, and over time I think about better ways in which I should do this. The way that assignments are set up in this course, we provide that reflective encouragement, because you don't have to, in the heat of the moment or kind of in response to a direct question in class, come up with a response in 15 or 20 seconds and then speak up. We have these asynchronous discussions that allow you to take the time to formulate your response and prepare it, or these essays where, again, you can write it and review it and revise it and going forward. Classroom norms, again, this is from an academic perspective, but think about norms of freedom of speech and freedom of expression, these ideas of discourse. We need to have rules. We need to have, let's share ideas. Let's agree to potentially disagree, but let's disagree on the comments. Let's disagree on the substance of the arguments that we're making. Let's not disagree personally. Let's not disagree and attack your family and make comments about your mother. I'm not sure why you'd want to do that, but it's a big joke when I was growing up. Your mama did this, your mama did that. Still shows up in a lot of things. We need to have these respectful discourse. We need to have rules. Not to have rules, but to have the civility necessary to provide. See again, I misspoke there. In order to provide a safe environment where everybody has the opportunity to feel valued and to feel that they are safe and are able to share their ideas, and their ideas are going to be respected. They may not be agreed with, but you have the ability to express yourself. And then finally, and again, from this, written as a academic discourse on a university campus, in this case a high school or K-12 school, but it extends to the university as well. Participation, if we're talking about academic discourse, student participation. So I shouldn't stand up here and do a soliloquy for the entire class period. It's online asynchronous, so it doesn't really work that way. You need to have opportunities to express yourselves, because that is where the value comes. The value of academic discourse is the sharing of ideas, that it's not one direction from the professor to the students, but it's every direction, professor to student, student to student, student to professor. I think that's most of the permutations. But you've got the ability to share your ideas in a safe environment, again, with the norms that we've talked about. So from the assignment perspective, take a look at academic freedom, freedom of speech, and academic discourse. This is a topic that I've revised over the 12 or 14 years I've been teaching this course. Sadly, when I wrote this, I wrote, so about 2010, maybe 2009. The nation is going through a period of heightened partisanship and animosity toward others with differing viewpoints. I wrote this 12 years ago, and it was true then, and it's even more true now, which is maybe a little bit sad. We need to be able to listen to one another. Often scientific evidence is challenged and or discorded if it doesn't fit into a political ideology. We've seen that with the global warming arguments. We've seen that with the COVID-19 responses. We're seeing that with other issues that are timely and in the news right now. In this course, we are going to examine a number of scenarios, a number of situations, a number of topics in which there are no definitive correct or incorrect answers. They're set up intentionally so that there will be differing viewpoints about the access to the science and the availability of the technology associated with it. So we need to be able to have a discussion about whether or not we should be pursuing these things, of whether or not this is a technology that should be available. And so the prompts for this, and again, you don't have to respond to all of these. You don't have to respond to any of these. This is to start you thinking about this concept of what does it mean to have academic freedom, freedom of speech, and academic discourse on a university campus? What does academic freedom and freedom of speech mean on a university campus that promotes the respectful exchange of ideas? What does academic freedom and freedom of speech mean to you personally? A lot of people can talk about their rights, but who among us is actually thinking about them and expressing our rights, and even more so to protect the rights of others? What does academic freedom and freedom of speech mean to you in regards to this course? I've already said we're going to disagree within this course, and that's fine. I expect that to happen. But I expect in this next comment, how do we ensure that these discussions are civil and substantive, informed discussions rather than impulsive reactions and superficial responses? We want to have kind of an informed discussion. We need to have a respectful discussion around these concepts. How do we establish then the norms that are necessary so that we are able to do that? And again, provide that safe environment for sharing potentially controversial ideas, but sharing it in a respectful way in which everybody feels valued and feels that their viewpoints are valued as well. And so those are prompts to think about. As always, if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out to me. I'm here for your success this semester. Thank you and have a great week.